Well, speaking of people who aren't messiahs, why do you see Donald Trump, and I think I'm quoting you here, as the final fall of the founder's presidency?
Well, because Donald Trump didn't try to do the job. He tried to use the office himself to tear it all down. His view in running for office was, he said this, right, that it's a problem, it's a swamp. I'm going to come and I'm going to fix this alone. And I'm going to fix it. And then he didn't even try to do the job. I mean, this is just fact, right? Trump spent very little time thinking about policy, if any, very little time trying to work to solve problems. He spent a lot of time trying to increase his power and trying to show that he could get things done. That's different from trying to solve problems. And there's just, it's a total departure. The presidency was created to bring the country together by the founders. It was created by the founders to actually deal with the biggest priorities for the country. And everything Trump was trying to do was to tear us apart and take advantage of the division. That was his strategy. It was not a bad strategy. It worked. It got him elected one time. I don't think it'll get him elected again, but that's what he was trying to do. And that's the opposite of why we have a presidency. The exact opposite of what the founders. He also believed that he shouldn't be accountable to anyone, that his choices that he makes should be up to him and him alone. And so he sees himself as a king. The presidency was created as an alternative to a monarchy. But he clearly sees himself as a monarch, as an elected monarch. That's exactly the opposite of what it was.
Is there consensus here behind closed doors, even among right-wing historians, that his presidency was unsuccessful?
Well, I'm not
I'm just
sure on
wondering
that.
what the shop talk is in the department.
I think among historians and among those who are informed, even scholars who are not historians, there is a recognition that he did not conduct himself as a president. Now, some might still say there was value in that. Some might say, well, look, by not conducting himself as a president, he was able to get the federal government out of these things we wanted the federal government out of. You know, by not conducting himself as a president, he kept immigrants from coming into the country. I mean, I could see people saying those things, right? But where I think there would be consensus is that he didn't operate as a president. What are the things presidents do? Presidents don't rule by fiat. Presidents rule by working with other branches of government. What do presidents do? They address big policy issues. What do presidents do? They try to bring the country together. He did none of those things. So he didn't operate as, he was in the office, but not of the office.
My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that there are reputable economists or political scientists who would have been willing to go on record and say that prior to COVID, things were going well during his presidency. If things had continued in that sense, and COVID had just never happened, the economy might have been doing better than when he took office, would you still, based on your analysis and understanding of the presidency, say that his presidency had been unsuccessful and we can divorce this from the success of the government or the country as a whole?
I would have said that because my view is you judge success, as we've done in this whole conversation, by what the purposes of the office are. It doesn't mean you can be unsuccessful in the purposes of the office, but there could be other positive externalities. But those are outside of what we're judging when we're judging. So just as I'm judging a student, were you successful as a student or not? You might still be a great athlete. I've had to say this to a few students. Just because you're a great athlete doesn't mean you're going to get an A in my class. You're going to do the work in the class. I'm judging you based on what you have to. So the same thing in the presidency. No, I was saying this and others were saying this long before because it was evident that he wasn't using the office, back to where we started, to try to bring people together to address common problems. That's not how he conceptualized what he was doing. And here's the irony of this that I try to point out in the book. When you try to drain the swamp, when you try to destroy everything, you actually empower the people who are already most powerful, right? Because the institutions help those who have less power. Those who already have a lot of power, they're going to find other ways to get there, get what they want. So the irony of what he was doing was actually empowering the people who already had power and not the people who, in many cases, voted for him, who were struggling and angry. And that's the other point I make in the book, which is that he's the end of the presidency as we know it, because the people who voted for him were really voting against the presidency. They didn't like what was the tradition of presidents. They wanted someone different from a traditional president. And so in a sense, they were voting against the presidency. And I guess it's their right. You can be a democracy without a presidency. We could create a different kind of executive. But people were voting for a different kind of executive. His supporters today, it's so obvious, right? They don't want a president. He's a cult figure for them, right? They want a kind of monarch. Okay. And there are societies that have elected monarchs. That's what people are attaching themselves to with him. And in that, they're rejecting the presidency.
But if Trump is the end of the presidency as we once knew it, then how do you see Biden's presidency? I mean, it's still not over, but where does it fit in?
I think Biden is trying to recreate, and I think he knows some of this history. He's trying to recreate and, in a sense, have a renaissance of the presidency. He wants to be a new FDR, right? And the Infrastructure Act and a lot of those things. But I don't think that's where we're going to end. I think he has been successful to some extent. But I think that's an interim position. We're going to have a different kind of presidency. It's not going to be the same. We're not going to go back to FDR long term. We can in the short run. We're going to need a president who manages differently. We're going to have different expectations, where you started, Robinson. We have to have different expectations for the presidency. For instance, we can't expect any longer that the United States can rule the world. We can't, right? We've come to expect from FDR forward that the president is kind of president of the world. You know what? He's not anymore. It doesn't mean we are the most powerful country, but we can't tell the Chinese what to do. And so we're going to have different expectations for this office. We're going to have different expectations at home also. And so the office is changing. It will be something very different going forward.